Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Relationship Circle podcast. I'm your host, Beck Thompson, and this podcast is all about showing you how to stop running in circles, ditch those dating games, and let your inner compass lead the way. Today, we've got Katarina on the podcast. Welcome, Katarina. I'm so excited. This has been a very long time in the process. I've rescheduled many times on this poor woman, and now we're finally here. And I'm actually so excited because when I first spoke to you, I was like, this is really cool. There's a lot of, I think you'll be able to offer the listeners a lot. So let me introduce you and then we'll get into it. So Katarina is a high performance executive relationship coach and the founder of Successfully in Love method. She helps successful executives and entrepreneurs become as accomplished in their relationships as they are in their careers, and they're so linked. Using her proven 3-phase process based on the behavioral science of attraction, disheartened executives can create their ultimate relationship fast and become successful in love. Yay. That's what we all want.
Yeah, right.
It's so cool to have you here. I want to talk about so many things, but, tell me, you said just before we hopped on that now you work with a lot of people in relationships. So tell me about who you work with and what that looks like now.
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole spectrum, right? I work with people who are single and looking for love. And then very often, they get into that relationship, everything's going really well. And then they hit the power struggle phase, right? And things start to get a little bit hairy. And so I might put back on the scene and help them with that. I also work with people who are in relationship and maybe the relationship hasn't been going so well. Maybe they feel like they've outgrown their partner, or it's just they're going through, again, that power struggle, and they need some help deciding whether they should stay, whether they should go, how they should navigate it. So I really work with the full spectrum. What I will say, I think the main overarching factor is I work with people who are pretty type A. They're pretty successful in their career, in their academic life. Like, life is working out for them for the most part, but the relationship, the romantic aspect just isn't. And I know that person so well. I mean, that was me for most of my life. I was like, I've got everything going really well. And I was like, I'm hopelessly single, cannot get off the apps, cannot find anyone. Then I did find someone. I was engaged, wrong person, had to call off that engagement. So I've really I've been there and seen it. And so have my clients.
Yeah, that's really cool that you've been there as well. And what do you find, what is getting in the way for these women or men that are so successful in every other area apart from this section of their lives?
Yeah. So, such a great question. 9 times out of 10, people who are very successful, if they are not happy in their romantic relationships, I can almost be certain that they're going to have their own psychological blockers, their own subconscious blocks, patterns, childhood wounds, whatever you want to call it, that are getting in the way. And the reason that they have become so successful is partly because they're being fueled by those wounds, right? And again, not to say everyone is, you can absolutely be very successful and not have a ton of wounding, but my hunch is you're going to be very happy in a partnership if that's what you choose. And life is going to be, you're probably not listening to this podcast, let's be honest. You're probably having a pizza party on the beach somewhere, having a great time. But so when I work with people who are, again, very driven, very perfectionist, maybe they overthink, maybe they're quite anxious, I will know that there's something going on for them internally that's making their work and their ambition and their drive be this incredible channel that's getting them a lot of really good results in their life. But that's going to be the symptom of a block that's actually preventing them from having intimacy and healthy love in their life. And before anyone freaks out, it's not that you have to give up your ambition. It's not that you have to stop.
That's what went in my head. I was like, what happens when you clear the block? Do you then lose the ambition for the work?
No. If anything, and I have seen this consistently with every single client that I have worked with, if anything, you increase your ambition and your drive. The difference is it's coming from a very well-resourced, healthy, I hate this word, but authentic place. It's coming from a very deep place of certainty. And this is the right path for me. And I feel secure in this. And I know where I'm going. And I love this. And the work is helping me get my needs met. And I'm feeling really replenished and rejuvenated by it. And from that place, when you have all of this wonderful real estate free up in your brain because you're feeling very secure and calm and confident and clear, you go on to make more money. if you want money, right? Not saying that everyone wants that, but generally I'm a big believer that abundance is our birthright and it's everywhere. So it's not that you have to give up the ambition. It's that the ambition takes on a different flavor. And I will tell you that the more secure that I have become in my life, the more secure that my clients become, the more they actually go on to earn. It's kind of tacky to say, I think, but it's true, right? Like you can literally look at your revenue and be like, okay, I love myself more. I'm doing better in my own internal world. My mental health is better. And I'm seeing it on the outside from my relationship to my finances.
Yeah. And I've actually read so much about money and love being really linked in that way. So that's very cool. It's a very interesting perspective as well, that can fuel you, but then fuel you from a different place. Like I really like that.
Yeah. And again, it's not to say that people who have a lot of money are inherently happy, right? Because I work with lots of people who come to me and they have like 500 million in the bank. They're very wealthy, but they're miserable. And so I'm like, that the money's still a proxy, right? And it's really interesting. I'm actually working with a client who is probably my most successful entrepreneur that I've ever worked with. And he's on track to become a billionaire pretty soon. And it's really interesting how this kind of move to becoming a billionaire is on the back of him healing his marriage with his wife, working really hard on his own self-love, on his own self-care. And that abundance is really flowing into his life. And his vision with it isn't to hoard it, but it's to give back, right? And so this kind of generosity is coming in. It's just really lovely to see. My kind of underlying mission is I really believe that smart, intelligent, driven people deserve to feel good and safe and secure in their nervous systems, in their relationships, because from that place, you are likely to do a lot of good in the world. And we need more people doing good in the world, right? We need less and more love and grace and generosity and all the really wonderful things.
Yeah, I got goosebumps because I was like, that's going to change the whole world and the whole like underlying reason as to why people reach for money, and because that's often people's big goal in life is that they want a lot of money, want a lot of wealth, want a lot of, but for what often it's for me, like I want that for, as opposed to for like us, or how can we give back, or what can it look like? Yeah, that's amazing. So what do you find is like the unconscious patterning that's happening in people's brains, or like the blocks that are happening? What are there general ones that you see, or is there just such a huge array of them?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say there's probably, I haven't actually sat down to count them, but I'd say there's probably around like 20 to 25 core blocks that I see recurringly through people. And I like to kind of bundle them up in attachment styles, right? I find attachment theory so helpful to kind of understand people's wiring and how they respond and their behaviors and communication patterns and all of these different things. But they all boil down to the different blocks. And we know from science, I mean, this has been talked about to death, that the blocks develop in us from childhood. I'm sure you talk about this so much, how between the ages of 0 and 8, our brains are developing, the brain waves haven't even fully formed. And we're like little sponges, right? We're taking in everything that we see in the world and everything that we experience, from our primary caregivers to our teachers, to our siblings, and we make it about ourselves. That's how children learn about the world, right? They have an egocentrism that makes them adopt everything that they see and hear and make a conclusion about themselves. And so given that no one here has perfect parents, right? Some people might have, borderline perfect, but generally speaking, you can have really loving parents who are doing their best, but they're tired. Maybe they're worried about money. Maybe they're studying. I know my dad was like, I think doing a PhD when I was a little kid. I grew up in like Soviet Union, right? And the whole economic system was collapsing and there was a lot of stress. So my mum was really distracted. Doesn't mean that my parents were bad. It just means that they had their own stuff going on and they weren't able to be with me the way that I needed to be in order to not have core wounds and to not have these kind of like blocks develop. And so as children, we experience these little emotional pains and they can happen recurrently. And these start to shape our worldview. They shape our understanding of the world. And essentially these become blocks because our understanding of the world isn't actually quote unquote accurate, right? It's kind of like a flawed view of the world. So I know for myself, for example, because my parents were so busy and my dad was traveling, trying to make money for the family, my mum was also working and everyone was freaking out about what was happening economically and politically, I was often left alone. We had a nanny. We weren't a rich family. Nannies were very affordable back then. But I was often on my own, often I was with somebody else. And I felt clearly at that time pretty neglected. And when I would cry out or want attention, they didn't have time for me. And it's not because they didn't love me. It's simply that they just didn't have time. And so the interpretation that I made in my little childlike brain was, well, I'm alone. I've been abandoned. There must be something wrong with me. Maybe I'm a bad kid. I'm not good enough. I'm unsafe. All of these different kind of interpretations, which go on to become blocks. And then as I got older, as we all get older, those blocks shape our worldview. They get buried into the subconscious. The subconscious is exactly what drives our belief system, our worldview. It really dictates the information, the data that we take in from around the world at any given point. I mean, there's billions of bits of data surrounding us. We can't consciously take it all in, right? The filters through within which we take in the world are all rooted in our subconscious, and our subconscious is formed in childhood, this filter that we take things in. So from that little age, those beliefs about myself, that I'm alone, that maybe I'm bad, I'm unsafe, became part of my worldview. And so then when we moved to the UK, and, I'm ostensibly like a privileged kid, I've got nothing to really worry about. My parents love me. I still carried that worldview. So it meant that when I went to school, for example, and I'm the foreign kid and kids didn't want to talk to me because I'm obviously a foreign kid, I don't speak English. My interpretation was like, well, I'm alone. I must be a bad kid. I'm unsafe, right? I'm misunderstood. That was another really big block for me, that I'm misunderstood. I'm like unseen. I'm unheard. I'm unsafe. I'm rejected. I'm not wanted. All of these stories about myself. And so because they become interpretations and ways that I see the world, I respond accordingly, right? I start to behave that way. Meaning, for me, for example, I would isolate myself because I was like, well, I'm not safe and I'm not understood by these people, so I'm going to isolate myself. And I became a bit of the class loner, which further perpetuates my own interpretation, right? Like it's a self-policy. And so that's just kind of like one little example, but that kind of followed me throughout my life. And, I look back and I'm like, well, I was always really nerdy. I was always really academic. I was always quite alone. I had my friends, but, it was like a handful of friends. And then when it came to romantic relationships, lo and behold, I would be drawn to relationships that would reflect my worldview, which is that I'm alone, I'm abandoned, there's something wrong with me. I experienced infidelity, a partner would cheat on me. My interpretation was, well, there's something wrong with me. I'm not good enough for that, right? And I'm going to be alone. So that's just kind of like one little snippet of how the blocks from childhood really go on to shape our entire personality and our entire life experience. And so from where I'm standing, the most important thing that we can possibly do isn't tons of therapy, talking about this, but it's to go back and identify what were the different beliefs, what are the different blocks that I accrued through no fault of my own in my childhood, and how can I recondition, rewire my brain to get rid of them so that I can see things more clearly. It's kind of like you're driving around with a blurry windshield, right? You can't see things properly. You're just driving in the wrong direction potentially. But actually, if you can go back and clean it up, then you can finally see. Then you can see that actually you are safe, you are loved, you are wanted, you are desired, you are good enough. You have all this incredible potential. And that's when you can go and achieve your greatest potential, have the best relationships, make the money, have the career, whatever it is that you're looking for, have the health. But you need to clear out those blocks. And that's where I don't know, people just don't.
Yeah.
So that's why so much.
Do you think people are not aware of what the blocks are for them? Yeah.
I think so. I think we have these kind of very cliche ideas, right, around like, oh, I've got a father wound and a mother wound and abandonment wound. There's kind of these pop culture ideas, which is great that we have language around this. It's really good. I mean, clearly we're all kind of waking up to how the brain works. But I think that it's still enigmatic and quite misunderstood how to actually solve it. I know for myself, like I trained in the subconscious mind. I'm really lucky. I've grown up with a father who, he's worked with Joe Dispenza, Brian Tracy, a lot of these kind of big thought leaders. And I've grown up in this world and I did all the reading. I knew all the theory. I went to all the retreats, blah, blah, blah. I was like knee deep in the stuff. I still screwed up my first engagement. I still didn't actually know how to get rid of the blocks. I knew how to talk about them. I knew roughly what they were. I knew there was something around abandonment with me. I knew I had like daddy issues, but I didn't really know how to pinpoint the exact different narratives that were taking me astray and how to actually recondition my brain. I just didn't know. And it took me a lot of time and a lot of kind of trial and error in really looking at all the different tools and techniques out there. I'm a fiend for this stuff, right? Like I live and breathe it. I'm literally like every day I'm still doing it. I didn't know I'd ever stop. But it took a lot of trial and error to really understand how can I actually make this efficient and actually get rid of things at the root. And when I did, that's when I was like, this is really cool. And that moment was actually, I called off my engagement to my ex-fiance, had this complete nervous, breakdown, meltdown. I was in my 30s. I wanted kids, I wanted a family. And I was like, what the heck do I do? My entire world has imploded. My assets are with him. Like my life is with him. It's COVID. I've got my family. I was really, really scared. And I just made a commitment that I am going to go and figure this out once and for all, because I never want to go through a divorce. I never want to go through this again. This is horrific. And so I just cocooned myself into tons of relational work, like really knee deep into relational science and subconscious mind work, and trained as a mindfulness teacher. And I met my husband 11 months later. And I will say in those 11 months, I wasn't even, I had my 6-month rebound period where I wasn't doing much work. I was just rebounding and having a great time. So actually the real inner work was maybe, half a year. The stuff's actually really fast when you know how to do it. I just think there's not enough education around it. And that makes me really sad.
I think you're right, because there's a lot, like you were saying before, there's a lot of these big terms and media has so much to play with this because these terms, like narcissism is such a huge term at the moment where everyone's a narcissist. And like nearly every new client I speak to, they were married to a narcissist and before that, like poor mindfulness got like this, that became pop culture. Like there's just these terms that get thrown around, but there's no substance or education behind what that actually looks like. And I know even attachment theory, like there's stuff out there, but people don't fully understand the depth of what that actually means or what it looks like or how to do it. And so no wonder people are exhausted, because they're searching, reading things. Like the amount of people I speak, I read things, I listen to podcasts, I do this, I do that, but they're not getting anywhere. No, because there's nothing actually, there's no real information there about how to do it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Attachment theory is so funny, right? Like, I did this when I first discovered attachment. I was like, I'm secure. Look at me. I've read about this topic. I've read the book. I'm really secure. Yeah. And I'd point my finger at my ex. I'm like, he's dismissive, avoidant. Like, it's all his fault. If only he would do this. And then in the end, I looked back and I was like, oh my goodness, I was horrific. I was such an anxious attachment and so fearful of women, right? Just didn't know it. And I hear that from my clients. Same thing as you. They all come from, they're like, yep, married to a narcissist, or my ex is a narcissist. Meanwhile, I work with couples too, right? So I've got the husband being like, my wife's a narcissist. I'm like, okay, so we both
I've done that too. Yeah.
And everyone's secure. Everyone's really proud of being secure. And I'm like, well, let's do the diagnostic, shall we? And it comes up that like 20% secure or something. It's funny. It's definitely a pop culture thing. And I think there's also like a lot of shame and a lot of people not wanting to take, and this is, I don't think this is people's fault. Again, I think it's like a media thing. There's this kind of like villainization, right, of like the narcissist and the insecurely attached person. Where actually, if you're single over the age of 25, you can bet that you probably have an insecure attachment style if you're going to be in a healthy relationship. And I mean, the narcissist thing has been thrown around so much. I've actually personally never met a narcissist, not like a proper full-blown one, right? I think my ex called me a narcissist once, and I was like,
you're one of them.
No. My friend found him. My friend found his Bumble profile. This was like years ago, and it said that he'd been engaged to a narcissist. And I remember I was like, "Oh, am I a narcissist?" I remember going to my therapist and relationship coach, and being like, "Am I a narcissist?" And they were like, "Well, no, because anyone who actually even questions that they might, obviously not, right?" I agree with you. I think the pop culture's got a lot to blame, and we haven't even dived into like masculine and feminine polarity.
Oh yeah, well, let's go there. Tell me your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, I'll start by saying I have a master's degree in gender dynamics, right? So I literally studied masculinity and femininity at Oxford, and I will tell you now that a lot of the polarity stuff is horrible, oversimplified, trite nonsense, right? If you actually look at the biology, if you actually look at the psychology of, men and women, you will see that both parties, it doesn't even matter what sex you are, have a lovely blend of masculine and feminine energy, right? And I think anyone who's actually kind of a little bit more sophisticated, has done their research, they'll understand this, that just because I'm a woman does not mean I have feminine energy inherently. In fact, the very idea of masculine and feminine energy is, I mean, horribly oversimplified, because the English language doesn't have an alternative name for them. That's the problem, right? We call it masculine and feminine instead of
yin I know. I often say yin and yang because I'm like, it doesn't resonate with me to say that, because that, particularly if you say to men that they've got feminine energy, there's like this revolt against it and not happy with it.
Yeah. But every man needs to have feminine energy. Otherwise, you are a toxic masculine male then. You are literally devoid of any emotion and feeling. And so much of my actual master's degree was looking at masculinity and looking at kind of the gendered narratives that we have around masculinity and like models of masculinity. And my conclusion was, well, we've just chopped off half of the feminine qualities because they're so associated with femininity, right? But actually, it means we're depriving men of their full spectrum, their full range of humanity. Yes. And this is why we have this like epidemic of violence and sexual violence. And I mean, that's a whole different topic. But yeah, I think that it's really dangerous to talk about, when I hear people talking about attraction and how like you need him to be like masculine. No, you don't. You need him to be a healthy, secure individual, right? He might have masculine tendencies, like he might take control and take charge. And maybe that's really nice in the bedroom, but I'm pretty sure you don't want that in the rest of your life. You don't want him taking control of you 24/7, right? That's going to be quite scary and abusive. So I think it's been really oversimplified, and it makes sense, right? Because that sex sells, and polarity is all about like basically having more and better sex. And it's kind of sad to me.
What do you say then? Like, because I do have a lot of women who are, and I suppose they get the masculine from because they want the man to lead, and particularly in dating, right? They're like, I'm over. I don't want to tell him I want to go for a date. This is where we should go for a date. And sometimes they end up taking control of that. But like, what should they be looking for? Or like, if that's not the masculine energy, like what are they looking for that person to step up and lead the way of the relationship?
Yeah.
I just want to quickly pause the episode here to tell you about my upcoming free Love Unlocked Masterclass. Maybe the reason you haven't found love is because you feel you aren't worthy of love you deserve. And I'm here to tell you that you are, and I want to give you the steps on how you can start loving yourself first to attract that worthy love into your life. In the masterclass, I cover 3 steps straight away, which are uncovering past patterns, understanding emotional needs, and learning how to communicate and set boundaries to amplify your self-worth. Details can be found in the show notes, and I cannot wait to see you there.
Yeah, I would almost invite women to move away from this language of viewing it as, masculine leadership. Not saying that there isn't such a thing. There is, it absolutely is. But I would invite women to look at it more from a place of like, are they securely attached? And are they healthy in themselves? Meaning, if they like me, if they have feelings for me, are they going to be confident and bold enough to take the initiative, to be generous, to put their best foot forward, to lead with love and kindness and excitement to see me? Are they going to take the initiative to call me because they're not riddled with insecurity around like, oh, I have to play hard to get, right? Like it's less about the masculine energy and more about being secure and someone who is very confident in themselves and very clear in who they are and just very forthcoming because they're not afraid to hold anything back, right? And I would argue as well that for a woman, when she's like, oh, I have to be in my feminine, don't be passive. Don't sit there. Yes, I understand the idea of receiving. But again, to me, to be able to receive is, again, just being securely attached. Because somebody who's secure is able to receive love and generosity and gifts and flowers and being, quote unquote, led in a really abundant, delicious way. And again, in the same vein, I think it's a lot of the unhappy couples that come to me, or a lot of the unhappy people who are dating, they'll come to, and I get a lot of men actually coming to me and being like, I'm really freaking tired. She expects me to book every date, pay for everything, take the quote unquote lead on everything. And they're just like, I'm quite frankly uninspired because I'm getting very little in return. right? I'm getting very little in return. And a lot of them are like, this kind of feels like not like a prostitution, but it feels like it's a very weird exchange that we have, because men want to receive too, right? Men want to feel special. Men want to feel that you can plan a really fun date for them, even if you're cooking for them or like gifting them with some kind of generosity. So all of that to say, I think you can want someone to lead. Absolutely. You're going to have to lead too, to an extent though. And it's less about, is it masculine or feminine? And more about, are they showing up as a really healthy, well-rounded, kind, gracious, generous, secure, confident individual who is not playing games, who is not holding back, who is forthcoming, who is vocal and generous with his affection, and is willing to put themselves out there and plan a date, who's going to be generous and pay for something, right? These are healthy traits. It's not a masculine thing. And I mean, it can be a masculine thing, but it's like, let's not look at it from that lens, because I think that can lead you astray and lead to resentment.
Yeah. I love what you just said, because sometimes it's also the other way around, right? And I think maybe that's what I think a lot of my clients have seen, is that they have led because they want to get it done and they want to organize the date, and then it continues that way and the man doesn't do anything. So like then and that's what quite often happens, right? We have one experience and we swing all the way to the other end because and so like how do we get back to the middle? I think you described it so beautifully, because for me, what you were describing, whether you name it masculine or whether you name it secure, it still has the same feeling in our body, in that you will feel safe in that relationship and that encounter.
You've said it. That word encapsulates everything, right? It's that safety, and men want to feel safe too, right? Men want to feel desired. Men want to feel like that you want them as well. I mean, I remember I made the first move on my husband, and he always said to me, "It's like, I would never have gone for you because you felt like you were out of my league," and he had his own insecurities. But once I gave him that sense of safety, that hey, here is who I am. I think I like you. I'm interested in you. Then he stepped up and he started quote unquote leading. And then because he was leading so much, I was like, my goodness, he's being so generous and he's really kind of putting his heart on the line. I'm going to lead back too. And this is how we ended up married, like within the year, right? Because we're both so forthcoming and both so clear. And that's because we were both at that point in our lives, like very secure. We worked so hard on ourselves. And it's that safety. You want to feel safe to relax, to be yourself, to let yourself be known, and to be able to receive whatever it is that they're giving you from a place of like, this feels really nice and I appreciate you and thank you for that. And now I want to give you something back, right?
I think that's such a beautiful message, in that, like, and you said it before, but things can happen quickly, because this is the age group of women I work with is like generally like 33 to like, let's say 50. And so in that age, a lot of them are wanting to have children. And so there's this pressure and this speed, I suppose, that they feel about, well, I've got to find someone, it's got to work and blah, blah, blah. But when they, I suppose, let go of the fear or let go of that pressure and do that internal work, like I saw it very recently with one of my clients, like she did the inner work and she's now with a partner, right? And now I'm doing couple sessions with them, and I'm like, this is just so cool how quickly that can work when you do the inner, like when you really throw yourself in and do that work. So like, I just want to give people hope that it doesn't mean that like, because the last 10 years of your life you're with someone who you are not matched with and then you're now single, it's not going to take another 10 years. Not if you're willing to do the work and look at what is getting in the way of that, or what had you repeating those patterns.
100%. I cannot agree with you more, right? I can't agree with you. Like, again, we can't dictate time, right? Like, neither of us can. And so, we're not matchmakers, which also studies show matchmaking isn't all that effective because you haven't done the inner work half the time. So, right. But that inner work, things can transform so freaking quickly. I mean, again, for me, I think it was like actually probably 5 to 6 months of properly doing it where, I pulled my finger out and just did like 15, 20 minutes a day of that brain reconditioning. I just worked on it and I felt the benefits. Like I actually felt the career benefits before I even met my partner. I had these like epiphanies around what I wanted to do in my career. And I met my husband like a few days after I'd taken a solo trip to like the mountains. And I'm joking. I was like frolicking down this mountain, like running down this mountain. I had COVID as well. So I didn't know what I was doing. But I was so euphoric about life. I felt so good. I had no partner on the horizon. I didn't think I'd actually meet anyone. At this point, I was like, it's fine. I'll make it work. I've gone traveling on my own. I'm just going to live my best life because I love myself. I feel very secure. I'm going to be okay. Whatever happens, I'll get my cats, I'll get my flat, like I'll be happy. And I was euphoric. And then I remember that same kind of a few days later, I went to a music festival on my own, feeling equally like I'm just living my best life. And I just went traveling on my own. I'm now going to go to a music festival on my own. I had my little White Claw in my hand. And that's when I met my husband. Like he literally came up behind me and he said my energy was just so magnetic. Like I was so positive, and I didn't come in there with an agenda. Not going to lie, like I was scanning the room, I was thinking, are there any hot men? But I wasn't.
You couldn't see him because he's behind you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he had shades on, and I want to say it was dark. Like this is kind of the thing in our relationship. I would say it was really dark, and he was like, "It was 3 p.m. It was 3 p.m. You just had too many drinks." But it worked, right? And like within 3 dates, I knew. I remember telling my friend in a voice note that I think I'm going to marry this guy, even though he lived in Canada, I was in London, he was unemployed, and My whole thing on my little list of items I wanted from a partner, I was like, I wanted him to have X net worth and all of this stuff. So he didn't take any of my surface level superficial criteria, like at all, right? He wasn't 6'3". He wasn't, he was like, I think he's 5'10". I don't even know how tall he is. But the point is I felt his energy. And because I'd done that inner work, I spotted him straight away. And like literally within 3 days, both of us were just kind of like, well, I think this might be it. Like, all right, not what I expected, but here we go. How do we make this work now? How do we figure out what country we live in? And
wow, this is very cool.
New. Yeah, that's what I mean. It can happen so quickly. And I hear that all the time with a client who he's in his 30s. He's in love and very likely going to end up with a woman who's like well into her 40s. How's that going to work, right? But he's like, she's it. And it feels right. It feels very safe. It's very different to anything I've ever had before.
It's so interesting, like I get clients to do a list so they have some understanding of what they're looking for, but I always say, I need you to trust your intuition over that list. If your intuition says no, it's a no. And if it says yes and it's not on the list, like, that I think your body has such more power than your brain does. And I think it's so underestimated how we feel when we're in situations. And I think maybe because I'm biased because that's how I guide my life. Like it's how I judge my friendships, how I know what I'm going to do. And like, it's how, like when you were talking about feeling euphoric and that you were going to be okay no matter what. I remember getting to that space just before I fell pregnant with our boy because we'd tried for 5 years. Nothing worked. We did IVF, but I remember going into IVF going like, this is amazing that I get to do this. Every injection, I was like, it's so cool that I get to inject myself with this. Like I was so positive about it.
Yeah.
And I was so excited. This is such a cool way to meet my baby. And I also had like, no matter what, I'm going to be okay. And that's like my mantra throughout life when anything goes wrong. No matter what, I'm going to be okay. My husband leaves me, I'm going to be okay. If the car breaks down, which it did, I'm going to be okay. Everything is, I'm going to be fine because I know that I have enough resources within myself to be okay no matter what. And it's a cool place to be.
I love that so much. I love that so much. You're like spot on. I mean, I'm going into an IVF cycle in 2 weeks. And I've kind of got to a similar place too, right? After like a lot of failed attempts and going through the grief process and like really questioning everything. And then kind of being like, it's okay. Like I have to trust the higher path and like, I'm happy. So what more could I want? Right. I'm very lucky to be happy irrespective of what happens. And happiness is within.
Totally. I remember seeing our little boy over here, when you do IVF, they show you the little blastocyst, which is like a 5-day embryo on the screen before they put it in your body. And it's a tiny, I think the gynecologist said like it's like a pin or it's so tiny, right? But on the screen it looks huge. And I remember looking at it being like, oh, there's my baby. Like who gets to see their baby like that before it's in their body? Like you don't get to see that if you conceive naturally. I was like, this is cool. What a cool step that you get to see.
I love your positivity.
It was very cool. I want to shift gears because you said something very interesting at the very beginning, which has nothing to do with dating, but you talked about the power struggle that couples get into. And I want to hear about like what is that and like, how can people know, like, when does it happen? What does it look like? What do they do? Like,
Oh, I think you'll know in the power struggle. I think we'll all know much more in that. So every relationship has its own kind of life, like trajectory, right? And they're pretty formulaic. I mean, obviously, timeframes can differ depending on whether you're long distance or not, depending on your attachment style. But generally speaking, we start with the dating phase, which is kind of a data gathering exercise. I think if you're anxiously attached, the dating phase is like, oh, I met the one, and you're planning your future. But actually, the dating phase is really there for data gathering. You're there to kind of see how's this going to work? How are we going to, like, do we share the same values? Do we want kids? What's your view on finances? Whatever it might be. Then you move into honeymoon phase. Honeymoon phase is where you're probably exclusive at this point. You're building a relationship. You're on cloud nine. You're flooded with hormones. Everything's like wonderful, and you've got the rose tinted glasses, and your partner's the bee's knees. They're really brilliant, and you know they're the one, and you're gonna get married, and you're gonna have an amazing life, and everything's fantastic. And actually, a lot of people will get engaged and married at this point. Then, when your nervous system has kind of acclimatized to them, you've got comfortable with them, inevitably the hormones are gonna start wearing off. They have to. You cannot live your life floating around in honeymoon. Like, you get nothing done. You wouldn't, you literally walk around again with like windshield wipers that aren't working. So the power struggle phase kicks in as a very healthy, natural, organic part of every relationship. It's the hormones flooding, going down, and it's you essentially relaxing into who you actually are without having to kind of put on this mask and like fake being this ultra perfect version of you. It's where you might start wearing, we'll start wearing less makeup. You might start speaking a little bit more kind of naturally. You might be a little bit more snappy. You might start vocalizing your need for a bit more space. Maybe you'll start talking about things that actually bother you about your partner. You just start being more of yourself. And unfortunately, because we've been flooded with so many hormones and we've both been kind of role playing our best behavior, this is where a lot of conflicts will start up, right? Because it's kind of like, well, who is this person that I'm in a relationship with now? Now they've taken this mask off. I don't even know who they are. They're not very nice. They're a bit of a bitch. Or, he's like being really rude to me. He's snapping back. You start having more conflicts at this point. These are really scary because it's like, who is this person? But actually, it's all part of the process. And the key thing in power struggle is to understand that this is a normal, healthy, fundamental part of your relationship. You have to go through it in order to learn the truth of who this person is, and in order to learn crucial skills that are going to be unique to you about how do you navigate conflict. How do you compromise? What are your needs? How do you express your needs? How do you get your needs met? What are your boundaries? What is your routine like, right? And again, it's this kind of like negotiation of both of your identities so that you stop being so codependent and you actually kind of develop healthy interdependence. And again, it can be scary because you're revealing your true self and you have to be vulnerable. But it's a really rich opportunity to be honest, authentic, expressive, learn to emotionally regulate your feelings and learn to communicate and learn to compromise and start to build a life together that you've actually co-created that's authentic. And once you're through that power struggle, then you go into a deeper type of honeymoon. It's kind of this like blissful, wonderful stage where you both have your sovereign identities. You both have your unique selves. You've created this life together that feels rich and nourishing and lets you be you. And that's like a much deeper love than anything you would have had in that honeymoon phase. But you have to go through the power struggle to get there. So a lot of couples break up in the past. I know if I look back at all of my previous relationships, I'm like, oh, yeah, I walked away in the power struggle because I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah, and it might signal something's wrong for them. Yeah, yeah, that's exactly where the couple that I'm working with at the moment is. So I hope they listen to this. And I remember saying to them the other night, this is normal. This is really normal part of the relationship. And this is where you learn these skills. So like exactly what you're saying, it's very cool. Like, and how cool I was saying to them, because quite often it's very rare that I'll get a couple that works with me at the very beginning of their relationship. And it's such important work. And like, this is where you set yourselves up for success. This is where you learn the skills of how you both communicate together, how you express your needs, how you do conflict, how you can do conflict well. And conflict is such a great part of a relationship if it's done well, I believe. And, so I love that I'm working with them such early on because they do have there's not resentment built up there. There's this like still a lot of love and care and willingness to look at their own behavior and do different quite often when couples are down the line and I work with them, there's a lot of, I've got to get through this like resentment and like I don't know if it's going to work because there's so much stuff built up there, so much gunk that you have to kind of get through to actually get people to take responsibility of their own parts. And
Totally. You've hit the nail on the head. I've got a couple I'm working with who, I mean, they're going to get a divorce. It's pretty obvious, but it's like they've been in power struggle for, I want to say 25 years. They've actually just never learned, they've never learned the tools, and they've both gone further and further and further into their own positions. And there is so much animosity and resentment that it's like, this is going to require a lot of heavy lifting to move through.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? They get so far in their position, and they've convinced their own brain that is the only way or the right way to be. So there's no room even to see another perspective because it doesn't, because they've cemented it so much in their brain.
Precisely. Yeah. And they're probably very insecurely attached. So again, everything that they're seeing is flooded with their own wounding, right? Like, this couple I work with, like, they're just blaming each other. And I'm like, you can't keep blaming each other. Like, it takes two to tango, and you can't both be narcissists. Right?
It's so good. Any other, I mean, there's so many different tangents. We'll have to have you back on because there's so many ways that I want to go with this conversation, but we do need to wrap up. So any other wisdom that you wish to share that you haven't shared yet? And also, I mean, we haven't even got to your, you have an amazing signature method of how you work with people. So please, if you feel free, you run people through that, because I was on your website yesterday and I was like, this is cool. This is a really cool method. And I love that you've, come up with it yourself. And it makes so much sense now that you tell me about your history. And like when you said your dad, I'm obsessed with Dr. Joe Dispenza at the moment. He's like, all I listen to, all I read is in my ears every day. So yeah, please tell everyone about that and any other magical wisdom that you have.
Actually, you know what I will say as a little pro tip? So a really dear family friend of ours is a guy called John Kehoe. He's like kind of like Joe Dispenza, just less big. He lives here in Vancouver, and he has a new book out. I was having lunch with him on Saturday, and he gave me his new book called Quantum Warrior. It's legit amazing. And I know this stuff inside out, and I'm still reading it being like, so much science here. Down. And like, brilliant, really good. I do not get commission for this. It's like genuinely really good. Really good stuff. And he's just a lovely, lovely man. But yeah, so I have a methodology. I call it the Successfully in Love method. The idea being that you can be successfully in love and successful in every other arena of your life. And it works. It's kind of a 3-pronged process. Number one, we want to liberate you from all of your blocks. So we want to identify what the blocks are, get really clear on how they're showing up in your life, get clear on the resentment and the emotional baggage that you're carrying around that's shrouding your view and preventing you from seeing things clearly. And we want to get rid of that, so liberate you from that. And I have tons of tools and techniques specializing in the subconscious mind to help you do that, as well as somatic work and lots of other modalities. So we want to get rid of that. Then number two, we want to reconnect you to yourself, and if you're in a relationship, to your partner. And what that looks like is getting really clear, now that the blocks have gone, on who are you, what is it that you need, and what does your life actually need to look like for you to be happy long term. So this is all about kind of building up that self-trust, so that what you are asking for, what you want, in your bones is completely fair, it's coming from a secure place, it's healthy, is rational, and you can have it. So it's about getting that clarity on like, what do you need to be happy long term, and also reconnecting with your partner. And then the third phase is the create phase. So we want to actually start creating some strategies that are very practical that you can integrate into your life to get your needs met now that the blocks are gone. And that I look at every arena of your life, but we also look at your relationship, right? So we look at communication, we look at different intimacy practices. How can you, again, kind of clear resentments together? How can you support your partner through this? And I love working with people individually. So I think my biggest pet peeve when I was with my ex-fiance was I knew we weren't doing well. I knew that we were unhappy. And we had a marriage counselor who was, he was helpful, but it was pretty slow going. There was a lot of talking. And I was really curious about this deeper work. And all of the programs that I found online were like couples work. And I was like, my ex is not going to go to this couple stuff. Like, he already hates the marriage counselor. Dragging him, dismissive, avoidant to this stuff is not going to work. So what I try to build here, and what I have built, is a program that you can do yourself to become as securely attached as possible, because from that place, you are going to change in the relationship, and the relationship is going to change as well. So if you're in a partnership, it works perfectly well solo. And then if you're single, great. Do this now so that you can find that healthy relationship and not have to go on 1,000 dates and call it for engagement like I did, but you can actually find the right person so much faster. But yeah, that's a 3-step process. And like you mentioned, I've got a 20-minute masterclass on that, as well as a little short video on my website about how it all works.
Yeah, amazing. And we'll put all the links in the show notes. Let's say in the bio. Thank you so much for being here. It was so wonderful to talk to you. And you've got so much wisdom and life experience. Like, it just feels like you've integrated your life and your knowledge so beautifully to come up with this and to support people and change the world ultimately, I believe.
Oh,
so
thank you so much. I'd love to hang out with you, talk to you again, come back here. Like, it's been a long time coming. And
I know.
Yeah, you're
we did a whole series. Thank you.
We do, yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you got value from this, please don't hesitate to share with a friend so they can get value from this too. And don't forget to hit follow so you don't miss an episode. It's also how I keep this podcast alive.
Audience exclusive.